I'm supposed to talk to you about 4 fears, and I will do that. But maybe it's better to go through a paradigm so that you will reset your mind, and when we talk about the fears, it will be in conjunction with the fears. Philosophy is the mother science. There are disciplines like medicine, psychology, engineering, social work, carpentry. All of those are the lesser sciences to the mother science, philosophy. When we look at philosophical thinking and study it, it enables us to have a better perspective about the environment in which we find ourselves and the conditions in which we live on a daily basis. As was told to you, I went to undergraduate school. My home is Detroit, Michigan, and across the rivers is Windsor, Ontario, Canada. But crossing that river is like going from one place to Zion, okay? So because we are a black family, very often things that we could not secure in Detroit, Michigan because we were black, we could cross the river and get. And that was my existentialistic reality. So I went to a Catholic men's college there called École Assumption, Assumption College. Now it's a co-ed, it's a University of Windsor, it's a big place now, but it was a very small place then. A large class would be 7. I mean, it'd just be overflowing with 7. And 8 was just, you can't manage that many in a classroom, so that gives you an idea. Priests taught us, and that was the way it was. One lay person. That was Mr. Phillips, who taught economics, and he taught it at 1 o'clock, which was right after lunch. And he had a hypnotic tone. He would say, good afternoon, gentlemen. We're going to discuss the gross national product of Canada. And that put us immediately into hypnosis. Well, after I was ready to go to university for a master's degree, a terminal degree in industrial psychology. I had already spent 2 years in the Army, and I was like behind from my class group, and I really felt I need to push, but a master's would do it. At that time, it was a terminal master's degree, like social work very often was initially. And that enabled you to go into a corporation and to bring around the thinking, the productivity, and then after the 2 years, after you got the degree, they would ask you to come and work for the company. And they would ask you to come to work as a junior vice president. And of course, your immediate response was, is that with stock? So it was a money maker. Now in the South, they tell you, if you're black, you go to the black school. You go to what we call HBUs, okay? Historical black colleges. That's where you go. In the North, they don't say you can't come here to school. There are certain programs they don't want you to be in. And they set up barriers to prevent and preclude you from exceeding the number of people that they want in the programs. You can go back as far as in the 30s and right on up into the 60s and 70s. The University of Michigan Department of Medicine would take in 4, flunk 1, and then flunk 2 in the next semester. So you only had a 1 or 2, 3 that got through year after year after year. Okay? Now, in order to be an industrial psychologist, this is what they require, that you do a 1-year practicum. Well, there was a list of practica from the ceiling to the floor. Semicolon, however, comma, none of them would accept black Nichols for the 1-year practicum. And instead of the university saying, we will find you one, we'll create one for you, they simply said, it would be unfair for us to accept you into the program, realizing that you could not fulfill the requirements for graduation. Now, for blacks, we've had these experiences before. So for my generation, and I'm 91 years old, okay? So, well, thank you. For my generation and my father's generation and earlier, you would be sent to Europe to go to school. And when you go to Europe, it's not the university that you attend, it's under whom you study. So you have to know under whom you're to study. And the people in my father's church did not, the last people that had been there in the 30s before Hitler. And so nobody knew under whom you should study. So in our wider circle of friends, there was a German Jew who was a psychologist, and he said to my father, send Edwin to study under Kretschmer. Kretschmer is at Tübingen. So they just packed me up and shipped me off, and there I was. And I was not German. I'm not German. I guess you're deceived by my long blonde hair and light blue eyes, but I'm really not German. So there I was in the middle of this place doing all the things. Now, how difficult is that? You have to learn another language well enough to sit in lectures and hear what they're saying to you at college level in German. Then you do your practica. You have clients that you must treat in psychotherapy. I was in southern Germany. That's where Tübingen is, just outside of Stuttgart. And the dialect there is Swabish. Now, you can't ask a schizophrenic patient, please speak standard German. They speak in the dialect, and you have to learn the dialect. Well, you do externships in different places. I had to learn the Swiss dialect, and then I did my doctorate at Innsbruck in Austria. I had to learn the Tyrolean dialect. Now, when Nichols would lose it is when the North Germans would come down, and they would ask me, what did the client say? What did he say? What did he say? And I'm looking at them like, I'm not German, you know. Of course I knew what the client said because I had to learn the dialect. They didn't want to be bothered learning the dialect. So I'm sharing that with you because these are the realities, the existentialist realities of being black and having to make an accommodation even in your education to accomplish the goals and objectives that you want. Now, studying in Europe, and particularly at the universities at which I studied, you do philosophy almost like a major. So you have two majors, and then you have to do another major in philosophy. So I want to start to share something with you. In 1784, Johann Gottfried Herder held implicitly to the view that society is basically an organic whole. So that means that everyone in this organization, in this group, or in America, we are an organic whole. But you have people who try to say, well, you don't belong, you don't belong, you don't belong, you don't belong. But this man is telling us that as a society, we are an organic whole. Now, organic means that all the parts function in there. Any part taken out, the organic whole is not whole, and it doesn't function. So this is a concept for inclusion of all in our multi-ethnic, pluralistic, and linguistically diverse society. He accounted for difference in culture and institutions of different people as being due to geographical conditions. So as a student, when I read this, I kept it in the back of my mind. And years later, I applied it to my philosophical aspects of cultural difference. Because I began to say, if we look at the place from which people come, what were the conditions at the time your ethnic group began its reality? Not centuries later, but when that group of people started as a group of people, what experiences did they have, and how did those affect the behavior of that today? And so we now come to the idea that those experiences that were shaped because in those environments you had to survive and thrive. Those are the two dependent variables. So if you're going to survive and thrive in that place at that time, what was there, what did it look like, and how did it function? And that imprint that you get, we now know that genetics carries these things. That is what we now call the essence of ethnic difference. What do we call it? Yes. Now, essence. What is essence? Essence is something that we, through intuition, we intuit. We just get it like that, and it stays with us. So the easiest way to demonstrate that is I'm going to give you 3 things to do. 1, I ask you to close your eyes. 2, I ask you to envision a specific noun. 3, you open your eyes and we discuss it. You ready? All right, close your eyes. Those that are peeping, you're paranoid. We have medication for that. Okay. I want you to envision a chair, even your most favorite chair. Now, open your eyes and we are ready for discussion. Had we taken Polaroid snapshots or snapshots from your camera of what every person in this room had seen, they would be different from each other, wouldn't they? Yet, if we piled that pile of papers that high and everyone looked at the pictures, we would all look at the picture and see it as a what? Chair. That is because we have intuited the essence of chairness. And that's different from the essence of a what? So, even if I were to sit on the table, would you be deceived by my behavior? Because the very what of the table has not changed. Yes. So now what we're going to talk about is the essence of ethnic difference. We are ethnically different. We recognize that. But we're going to talk about the essence of ethnic difference that makes us different. Okay? All right. Now, the motivating factor for all societies is to survive and thrive. From the origins of Western society, the primeval angst has been that of scarcity. So I'm going to develop that concept for you. And the philosophical discipline which examines scarcity as a driving principle is axiology. Is what? And axiology is the study of values. Axiology is the study of what? Okay. In a binary environment, now you just had an excellent speaker here talked about both and what? Both and. Okay? Well, in binary, you have either or. So in a binary environment of scarcity, that primeval angst prevents and precludes the laudable principles of equity and justice. So if you're frightened all the time about we don't have enough, we don't have enough, we don't have enough to survive, we're going to die, then are you able to really talk about things like equity and justice? All right? Confronted with systemic institutional racism, the principles of equity and justice are moot. The economic competitiveness of the world around us, let's think of China, is not affected nor concerned with our preoccupation of systemic institutional racism. We need to focus on the new reality that confronts us, that is, becoming a second or third-class world power because we refused to utilize all of the human potential that we have. You just had a lecture early this morning talking about inclusiveness, bringing people in. Well, unfortunately, we have not done that in this country. If you look at the number of physicians, they are disproportionately white. Not even if we take the percentage of blacks in the population, do we have a comparable percentage of black physicians. I taught at 2 of the black medical schools, Meharry in Nashville and Howard in Washington, D.C. And the number that we put out each year is a drop in the bucket. If just all of the medical schools in the country would take 5 students, that's all, no more than 5, you would have more produced in 1 year than Howard and Meharry are able to put out. Okay? So we are wasting human potential. And as long as we do that as a nation, we will not be successful in competing with the world around us. And that is because epistemology asks, how do you know? Not what you know. In classical philosophy, it asks, how do you know things? And as ethnic groups, we know things differently. Not mean that one is good and one is bad, they are just different. Okay? And the easiest example, so you won't get lost in that thinking, is if you are teaching a child to read in Western culture, you teach them phonics. These little symbols you pronounce these ways, and that helps you to know words. But that won't help you to learn Chinese characters, because there is no ch, p, f up there. Okay? It's a character. Now, if you understand the epistemology of Asian culture, that epistemology is to see the whole and the parts simultaneously, then you can understand how people teach children to read a Chinese character. You have to look at the whole configuration, and at the same moment you're looking at all of the strokes that make it up. So there's the wholes and parts, but here's the thing that is different. You have to see it simultaneously. Otherwise you can't read Chinese. So there's no ch, p, f up there, it's just see the whole character, the position of each of the strokes simultaneously, and you can read Chinese. Now, that's two different epistemologies. And if we only rely on one, we lose. Now, what's evidence of that? Well, Scott Page, University of Michigan professor, historically, is brilliant, and he wanted to know something about this. So years ago, he took homogeneous teams, that means all white male teams, to solve problems. They got on it right away and they started and they moved real quickly. He also had heterogeneous teams, males, females, black, white, Asian, all coming together on a team. Now, in his literature initially, he said it was difficult to get all these people to work together. But once they got their act together, they were more creative and more productive than the all-white male team. And he's done many studies. You just go on the YouTube and look for Scott Page, and you'll see brilliant things to see and understand. Now, what is the significance of that work? It says that what I'm talking to you about, we are a multi-ethnic, pluralistic, and linguistically diverse society. And as such, each person makes a contribution through their axiology, their epistemology, and their logic, reasoning. Now, with all of that, we can be competitive to any culture around the world, because everyone is here from every place around the world. And all of these values, ways of knowing, ways of reasoning to an answer, are an integral part of our organic whole. But if we don't utilize it, then we will become a second or third class power. Because we are still talking about white and white privilege and race and all these things that have no reality in thinking beyond the immediate moment of scarcity. Do you think that the Chinese care whether you're white or anything else? What is the answer? The answer is what? I can't hear it.
No.
Yeah, the answer is no. You know the reason why? Because you ain't Chinese. Okay? My son left Morehouse 30 years ago, and he's lived in China since then. Okay, he went to go to school over there, he stayed. But he still is not what? Okay, and they don't ever let him what? Forget it, okay? All right? So what I'm sharing with you is that the world is a world of competition. Globalization has taken over. There are many factories and things that closed. But people thought, oh, the other has taken my job. The other is responsible for this. They're giving too many privileges to them, to those people, and I don't have. Well, the them and the other weren't the people that closed your factory and moved it overseas. Okay? And the most important thing is that the world is moving from a computer age into a new reckoning age, a complete new set. And when you look at what happened in the 70s when Bethlehem Steel, all these plants, textile firms in South Carolina, and so closed, took all that equipment and shipped it overseas. And you get the Rust Belt going across Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, Illinois. They just rusted because they weren't going to invest in upgrading those factories. It was easier to go someplace where there were new factories because the war was over, they built new factory and do your work there. Now, did the other do that? No, the other did not do that because the other can't control anything that magnitude. But what happened was when those factories closed, the government tried to send in programs to bring that group of people, high school graduates, primarily a large white population, up to be able to do the work of the computer age. Guess what happened? They were all high school graduates, but when you looked at their high school transcript, they did not have even algebra. Most of them had, the last was general math. Maybe one or two had algebra, and if you ask them what algebra is and how it functions, they couldn't tell you. Were they prepared then for that century and that change in the workforce? What's the answer? They were not. Now, whom did they blame? The other. Okay? Now, we are already into the globalization of the 21st century. And we are going into new ages. We've moved beyond the digital age. We've moved into new ages, the age of reckoning and so on. And that's going to require skills that are far beyond what these were requiring just in the computer age. Now, if you could not compete then, how on earth do you expect to compete now? Okay? So people that had graduated from high school, worked in the factory, earned a good salary, union protected, and were able to send their kids to college, were classified as middle class. Now, what is going to happen to that group now that they are no longer middle class? They now belong to lower class. What is the cognitive dissonance that happens when you have to realize that you are lower class? And when I talk about the four fears, we'll understand how some of that really got into the emotions of people that never saw themselves as lower socioeconomic class, because they had always lived socioeconomically as middle class. That's a tremendous strain on the mental health system in terms of what happens there, and we'll talk more about it. All right, I want to start now with the philosophical aspects of cultural difference. And I assume, people assume that I know what I'm doing. Okay, there we are. I know what I'm doing. All right, the global marketplace is what? Can't hear you. All right, now what does that mean? All right, we're multi-ethnic in this room. We understand that. Now, what is pluralism? Well, we have LGBTQ, okay? We have Black Lives Matter. We have white supremacists. Those are all different groups. They are a part of pluralism, okay? So it's a pluralistic society, and we are linguistically diverse. How many people work in some place where English is the second language for many of your colleagues? Okay? Well, that's the linguistically diverse. Now, the United States, interestingly enough, is what? Multi-ethnic, pluralistic, and linguistically diverse. So that means we have a workforce that competes with the globalization market. Semicolon, however, comma, if we fully utilize all the human resources, we can successfully challenge any what? Competition in the globalized marketplace. To accomplish this goal, the American workforce, that's the organic what? Whole, must demonstrate what? Diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I've already told you, if scarcity is your reality, it's unlikely that you're willing to talk about what? Equity. Okay? Because that means something is taken away from you. All right, the new organizational structure. Historically, it was vertical and hierarchical. You enter into the workforce at one level, you get an education, high school, you go to another level, college, you keep moving up. This is vertical, all right? And it was hierarchical. This was the worker, the supervisor, the manager, so on. So it's vertical and hierarchical. All right. Now, that system collapsed. Now we have horizontal and flat. That means that you work on a team, and the unit for production is team product. The team, now you can't say, I did my part. That's not working. If your team wasn't successful, you don't have a job, okay? So I did my part isn't getting it. The team. Now what does that require? That means people have to come together, concentrate on a task, and do it. Now, Dr. McLemore, Dr. McLemore, I'm looking at her right now. Dr. McLemore talked about how different groups function, all right? And she was talking about what if a team rotated the leadership? Who's responsible for it? Well, the Japanese have been doing that for centuries. They call that a titular headship. That means that you got 5 people, and they are the ones that make the decision. Now, the thumb is in charge this year. Now, will the index finger be doing things to hurt the thumb, realizing that next year you're going to be in that hot seat? Okay? So titular headship is what she was talking about. And Japan does that. But what do? I'm in charge until death takes me from this life. And what I put into practices and written down will keep me going long after I'm dead. Okay? Well, that's not going to get it. Okay? Now, when the project is completed, the team members must morph. What does that mean, to morph skills? Change, yes. Now, for those of you that have young children or grandchildren, you ask them about it, they'll tell you that the out-of-space entity from the planet Zupu or something comes into the world and then goes through a permeable screen and they look human. On this side, they're from the other parts of the world. So they morph through this field. Now, when teams break up, you have to morph into another team. You may not have all the skills, but you need to acquire as many as you can so that you can morph. Because if you don't have a place on the team, guess what happens to you? The company gives you a month to find a team that you can work on. And if you can't get it done, you can't find a team you can work on in a month, they say to you what? Bye. And it's nothing personal, okay? Now, that means that people have to learn how to do what together? And the team becomes an organic what? An organic whole. Are you connecting ideas now in terms of where Nichols is going? Very good. All right, there's Scott Page again. That's his work, what he's proven. Heterogeneous teams are more successful and creative than homogeneous teams. Proven. All right, let's move along. Dysfunctional thinking. Dysfunctional thinking is about whom? The what? Yes. Those people and them preclude and preserve team membership and team efficiency when you're talking about those and them. I can't work with them. They never respect time. They think that they have all the answers. They talk in circles. They are always in a rush, too rude, don't even have time to say good morning. They always have something to complain about. Okay? Now, with a clear understanding of cultural difference, we move beyond and move forward as a what? And that's the unit of production for the 21st century. Okay? All right, cultural competence and leadership. Cultural competence and leadership is the ability to interact effectively with your American workforce, which is what? English is a second language for many workers and clients. Pluralism, that's like the LGBT community, Black Lives Matter, white nationalism, all these different groups make us a pluralistic society. Multi-ethnic leadership must understand how and why ethnic groups manifest difference in the workplace. And that's axiology, epistemology, and logic. We're going to talk about it. Leadership must explain the what, the essence of ethnic difference. That's what you are obligated to do. Now, axiology is a study of values. Epistemology asks how, not what you know, but what? How you know it. All right, logic is how you reason to an answer. Cultural competence is the capacity to extract from others, accept and utilize the uniqueness of their world, problem-solving skills, or Weltanschauung, whatever you want to use, but problem-solving skills is probably the best one. All right, now, what does that say? It says when you come up with an idea, if I'm really able to see beyond my own ethnic essence and see the whole group as a team, then I must be able to extract from what you have said and do what? Accept it, not say to me, prove it to me in the way I know. Okay? All right? And then utilize the uniqueness of problem-solving skills. So let's look at an example. When we talk about Black epistemology, African, the Hispanic group is in there, and also African, the Arabs from North Africa are the same group. We're all in the same group. All right. In that group, we talk about knowing something through symbolic imagery and rhythm. Now, symbolic imagery is something that you intuit like chairness, okay? And rhythm isn't clapping your hands, it's the biorhythms that people have. Sometimes in Black English, we say the vibes, all right? Now, if you are going to work with me, you have to extract and accept what I'm telling you that I intuit. But we don't do that. We say, Nichols, you have to put it into something that I can understand from my way of knowing. Otherwise, I won't accept it. So now, how long does it take Nichols to think, what can I put into a system of counting and measuring that my white colleagues can understand in terms of symbolic imagery and rhythm? Well, keep thinking, Nichols, and what happens in terms of other teams and their progress. They're passing us by, aren't they? Because Nichols is still trying to figure out how to tell you what I know. Okay, oh good. We had a nurse here. We have other nurses in here. All right, if you go to a nurse and she takes a stethoscope, she listens to the what of your heart? The rhythm. Because if the heart is out of rhythm, it is not what? Functioning properly. All right, what about symbolic imagery? Oh Lord, what am I got to think? Oh, I know what. EKG. All those little squiggles on a piece of paper are what? Symbolic imageries of the condition of the heart. So now how long did it take Nichols to transliterate my knowledge into something that you could count and measure, that you would understand, without having accepted it and said, let's move on? Because those are the hang-ups that we have. Those are the things that get us into difficulty. All right. Okay, let's go on. All right, now we have groups of people that are not an ethnic group in and of themselves. They share an ethnic worldview. Latinx and Afro-Arabs. They share an ethnic worldview. They're not an ethnic group. You can be white Hispanic, black Hispanic, Native American Hispanic. You can be Jose Wong or Fujimori and still be what? Hispanic. So they're not an ethnic group in and of themselves. So what do you have to do? They share an ethnic worldview. What is necessary to share an ethnic worldview? A catastrophic event changed everything for your ethnic group forever. They were forced to speak a new language exclusively and forced to convert to a new religion. So if you're Hispanic, the catastrophic event was that your forebears were subjected to colonial Spain. They were forced to speak Spanish exclusively and to convert to Catholicism. All right, if you're Muslim, you're in North Africa, convert to Islam because of the Islamic wars, speak Arabic exclusively. Now, you have people that live in different areas who are convert to Islam because of the Islamic wars, but they don't speak what exclusively? Yes, so they're Kurds, Druze, and things like that. Okay? All right. Now, axiology, the highest value lies in the object. All right, what we're going to do for Europeans is we're going all the way back to the end of the last ice age. So the crop season was how long? Only 3 months. All right, time is linear in their group. They begin at A and end at what? You can't come later starting at B prime and expect to finish at, start at A prime, expect to finish at what? B prime, because at the end of B, you're what? Dead. If you haven't accomplished everything in Europe by the 3 months, then you're dead. Because you got 9 months when there's nothing to grow. That's kind of harsh, isn't it? So if the object is what you have to do by close of business today, and you don't do it, you're in deep trouble. But you bring it back tomorrow morning. You say, well, I've got it here tomorrow morning. They say, no, because you missed the what? There it is. You see the connection between our collective unconscious memory, our entrenched memory from the past. So in European society, the most important thing is that you must start on what? And finish it when the time allotted, or you end up what? With no second chances. Now, if that's been the imprint for your group from the end of the last ice age to today, then how do you feel about time? Because time means either you're alive or you're dead. Now, if you come from another part of the world, I'll come back to these. If you come to another part of the world, if you go to Africa and around the equator, is there a growing season? Food is what? Food is omnipresent. So if food is omnipresent, then are you struggling to plant something and grow it in 3 months? Because food is there all the time. So what is your approach about scarcity? It's not a part of your reality because food is omnipresent all the time. All right, well then when you look at that very carefully, you begin to think in terms of, well, what do you do if you don't have to spend killing yourself trying to grow food, harvest it, store it, and preserve it? You develop relationships. So the axiology of our culture is a relationship. The axiology of the European culture is the object. If you don't have that object in that 3 month period of time, you end up what? Well, then scarcity is a reality, isn't it? All right, now let's go back here and see what happened. In the European culture, if you're pregnant into the 3rd trimester, can you be running around the hills helping your husband hunt for the wild animals? No. So you have to go back to the place of residence. And while they're there, they become very observant of everything there. And what do they find? This small goat in labor, not going very well, nibbles leaves from that small bush right there, dilates and delivers. Now, you have seen other animals in labor nibble from that bush, dilate and deliver. Now, ladies, you are in labor, it is not going well. What would you be likely to do? Okay, now what did European women do? They developed a what? A pharmacopoeia based on their experiences with roots, herbs, barks, grasses, roots, and leaves. With those same things, like dillweed will tea will settle your stomach, dillweed will also preserve. So they developed a pharmacopoeia, they developed a preservation of food sources that would last for the 9 what? Months, and they learned to count and measure centuries before men could grasp the mathematical constructs. We couldn't understand. Now, why was that? Because women have menses, which is how many days ordinarily? 28 days, which is the same lunar calendar, isn't it? 28 days in the lunar calendar. And gestation is what? 9 months. And how long do you have to have food stored to survive? 9 months. Well, women knew how to count and measure centuries before men could grasp the concept. We had nothing in our system to make us understand that. Now, the question is, how did European men respond to that? They developed a what? A hierarchy, and women were what? Subject to their husbands. Women were the what of their husbands? And a woman's dowry, that's the money you come with, became her husband's what? All right? When women tried to protect ovulation and things like that, they had Cronin societies, but people came in and killed them, called them witches and everything else. All right? In English common law, the wives may be what? By their husband. And we have the rule of what? Of thumb, which says that your stick can't be any larger than that thumb when you're disciplining your wife. Okay? Now, did you hear that? So that tells me that that experience is not a part of your what? Of your ethnic subculture, is it? Okay? So now let's understand this very carefully. According to European law, the woman is the property of her husband. All her money goes to him, and if she gets out of line, he can discipline her. Now, what black man in this room is going to take your wife's money and beat her with a stick? Will that black man please stand? So now, you see, it's completely different, isn't it? It's completely different. So those are the essences of ethnic what? Difference. We can't perceive something like that. But that's right there in the law. All right. My time keeps moving, and I want to get down into some of these other things, but let's see how we can do this real quickly. All right, for us, the highest value lies in the relationship, and we establish a one-on-one contact. Now, what does that mean in your work? In European culture, when we want to announce something, we send you a brochure, okay? Something that you can read. And you read the brochure, and you know the time and the place of the reality. That's what you have. All right, that's good. Now, if you have that brochure, you have one of your black friends, and you say, why didn't you come to the meeting? Didn't you get the brochure? They said, I got the brochure, but you didn't what? You didn't call me. So now that was for everybody else, but if you really wanted me to come, you need to what? Oh, those are ethnic differences, aren't they? Okay. That's not good or bad, just what? So if you're going to have interaction with blacks in the community, you need to go out and do it on a one-on-one basis. You can't say, oh, you'll come together, we're going to do this, okay? That's it. Now, for other groups, you can send out the brochure, you can announce the time, and people will come, okay? Now, when we come to meetings, what did you see outside this morning? Food. Because you don't come to a meeting, you don't have no food, okay? Now, how many times do you come to other meetings with those people and there ain't nothing there? You have a coffee break later, okay? Now, is that good or bad? It's just what? Different, that's all. It's an ethnic difference. That's all we have to understand. All right. I see my time is almost up, so I want to very quickly go into these 4 fears. The fear of death. Now, at the time that we had this outbreak of COVID, we had people thinking of us and the other. And people were thinking that this will not happen to us because it's something that always happens to the other. Okay? So, among the other, there's a high incidence of contracting COVID-19, astonishing numbers of death. That's to be expected because the other has obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure, and heart conditions because of their lifestyle, which is projecting blame on the victim. High incidence of death in nursing homes of the elderly is because the other work there and they bring COVID to work from their homes. COVID will not attack us because the state says we are what? Immune. Don't worry about it. Now, masks. No government can force me to wear a mask. I have my rights, a large gathering at the beach, whatever I want to do, church meetings or whatever. That's us, don't have to wear the mask. The government proclaims the us. Our thinking is that we were safe, that the us was safe. Semicolon, however, comma. Once the stark realization that none are exempt from contracting and or dying from COVID, the terror of paralyzing fear gripped the us. And then we start with the fear of death. Okay? Now, what cultural competence things can we learn from this? Why were we not told that COVID would kill the us? We're the good people, we're the strong people, we do all the things we're supposed to. The emotional issue was cognitive dissonance. I've been told something on the radio, on television, I think something, and I think I'm secure. But what do you hear them saying once they're hospitalized? I didn't believe it. I didn't think it would happen to us. But you see, pandemic. Pan comes from the Greek, means all. It don't mean yim and them, it means all, not us and them, okay? All right, the belief system was I am different from the other. Now the goal, to move the thought process beyond the misuse of dichotomous logic and thinking, which forms isms. Also, to separate us from others, and we have therefore no empathy or understanding or even tolerance for the other. That's what happens. Now the second fear is the loss. Statistically, there's a high correlation between mental health issues and unemployment. Currently, many never thought that they would lose their what? Yes. They too are seeking unemployment benefits and government handouts for their families and or for their businesses. The greater societal danger is their projection of blame. They took my job. They are unfair. They are un-American. All right? Your past privilege is no longer a necessity. In other words, we're going to have real equity here. The other in the global marketplace has the newest technology, and they have developed the best products, because all outside of us is the other. All right. Now, the us has exhausted their savings. They have no money to pay their rent or mortgage. They're questioning themselves, will I lose my house, my apartment? Some are faced with the potential of homelessness, and others have to go back to live with their what? That's the last one. Okay. Food insecurity. Now you see, they used to say that you were on food stamps, okay? And it was your fault. Okay? Now you have to see how language changes. When the us have the same issues, we now call it food what? Food insecurity. Okay. All right. That's my first time experiencing economic strain, fear of the unknown and uncertainty. Now, what is the cultural competence here? This is a new experience for the us, and sadly, it is a common occurrence for the other. Okay? Happens all the time. And the emotional issue, the loss of self-esteem, the loss of belief in oneself, and people begin to think, I failed, it's my fault, there's something missing that I could have done differently. And what happens is people begin to self-medicate, okay? And then we begin to see suicide ideation because they lost, all right? I got 2 more to go, okay? All right. Now the next one is the fear, okay, of conflict. Now when you have all these people in an apartment or a house for 2 years, and they're not going to work, they're not going anywhere, they're doing everything at home, somebody gets on somebody's last what? Okay. So self-destructive behavior, anger itself for neglecting the family, the job, there are people all kinds projecting onto themselves. And then sometimes they turn the anger upon the self, which is depression, all right? And they self-medicate with drugs or alcohol or other things. In Ohio, it's methamphetamines. They take overdoses to escape, which is the rule. Now, that's something interesting. Sometimes they'll take an overdose, and it's called an accidental death, and the insurance will pay for the accidental death. That's how some people manipulate the system to have money for their family. Okay? Family aggression, domestic violence against the wife and other members of the family can become verbally abusive, physically dangerous. People have separations and divorces. There's no control of your day. And child abuse is the easiest, what? Scapegoat. They're the least that can say anything. This kind of things happen. All right, now cultural competence in this situation. The realization that the value system of different ethnic groups respond differently to conflict. The emotional issues, behavior borders on neurotic and potentially psychotic breaks. The belief there's no hope, nothing to live for, and feeling a sense of isolation. Now, here's the last fear. That's the fear of the future. And that's when the us and the they come together. Is my job still there? Will there be a job for me? Many of the service industry jobs were forced to close because they were without income for an extended period of time. Thus, they could no longer exist, all right? Primary government effects to restore national economy. We talked about the national economy, but not about the person, all right? However, the workplace of the 20th century has changed to globalization, and I talked about all those things. Now, these are the 4 fears, but there's another group. You know, we talk about the other, all right? What happened to the other? The other had 2 sets of fears, okay? They had the fear of death and the fear of loss. So let's talk about us, the others. What about those people over there? Their families' circumstances truly made them the other. When extended families of the other lived in small, cramped quarters because of what? Redlining, okay? Without limited space, their fears are more intense. Some members have pre-existing health conditions that make them vulnerable to death from the virus. Often, one or more of the family members are classified as essential workers and must go to work in the workplaces where the virus is latent and unsafe. All right? The stress factor of being an an essential worker. Now, what was that? The meatpacking plant. Can you imagine that? Nobody tells you how many people died in the meatpacking plants, but they said it was essential. If you're in housekeeping in a hospital, okay, that's makes you an essential worker. You've got to go and handle all those viral linens and everything else that's going on. And those people didn't have personal protection equipment. All right? And then there are essential workers return home to the extended family in the living conditions and space, who will get sick, who might die, and of course, they are always seen as the other, those people. Now, I want to close with just a couple of concepts. We are on the border of becoming a third-class world power. And the reason for that is we are unwilling to utilize all of the resources that we have. And the unwillingness to hold on to something that is not real, thinking that that's going to help you to survive. And that is the most dangerous part of it. And the isolation confinement of COVID has extirpated many mental and social issues, mental health and social issues. The murder of George Floyd by the white policeman in Minneapolis ignited a whole new movement for social justice, and it galvanized Black Lives Matter. Presently, the world is entering the experience age, and the others sometimes say the age of reckoning. Both require higher academic skills, which most American workers do not what? Yes. Globalization in the marketplace and entry into the age of reckoning have necessitated a challenge in our behavior to survive as a nation in the 21st century. We can no longer afford the luxury of blaming the other. We must utilize fully the strengths of our multi-ethnic, pluralistic, and linguistically diverse workforce. Thank you.